All right. Hello, everyone. So I apologize for the poor lighting. I'm having to do this from the basement today. But we should be okay since I guess most of what we're going to be looking at are the slides. All right. Get those slides fired up. So a little bit of housekeeping stuff just before we begin. I was thinking that what I would do concerning the reading responses or critical responses, whatever I've ended up calling them. Um, I do want to deliver some detailed instructions, but because of the material that we have to cover in our lectures, I'm not sure how much I can do during lecture before the assignment is actually due. So what I thought I would do is, in addition to providing the template with the instructions, um, is that I would make a short video kind of going over the template, going over the instructions, and I'd make that available tomorrow or Friday, depending on when I'm able to get it done. I'll try and get it done as soon as possible, but this way, you kind of know what boxes you need to check in order to complete the assignment and do well on it. So, how does that sound to all of you? Like normally, I would always provide um, a template with the instructions, but 10-15 minute video going over the instructions, answering any questions that I anticipate you have. If that sounds good to you, then that's what we'll do. Yeah, I saw some thumbs up. Janet in the chat says, yeah, that would be helpful. So that is what we will do. Very good then. Um, sorry, I also have a dog. Just looking after this critter. So if I have to get up or if I seem distracted by something, that is just the pupper. Go lay down. Lay down, you. There, go pupper. Okay, so before we get into the material, yeah, if my dog could speak, I'm sure she'd say hello as well. But she cannot, alas. So, before we get into the material, I just kind of want to get a feel for who had a look at the optional but recommended readings. So, those were Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy. Wonder if anyone had a look at those. I'll be honest with you, I did not reread them, but I've read them so many times that I've got the idea. But I'm curious if you read, okay, you've read half of Descartes. Okay. Didn't make it to six. That's fine. I just think it would be interesting to hear what you thought of it. Because there is actually, although Kim refers predominantly to arguments, well, not even Descartes' own arguments. He kind of sketches out arguments that you can, I guess, find there, but they may not necessarily be um, the exact thing that Descartes was trying to show. But he does kind of skip over some background when it comes to the cogito, which you find in the second meditation. Right, this is one of the most famous lines in Western philosophy. I think, therefore, I am. So the background, at least in meditations one and two, I think is helpful for that. And then meditations two and six um, are where Kim kind of pulls these sketches of these Cartesian arguments for dualism. Um, yeah, they are a little stream of consciousness. That's the idea. They were written as well, like a meditation, as if he's just sitting by the fireside thinking and writing down what he's thinking. And I think that's kind of cool. If you want something though that's a little bit less stream of consciousness, but which covers most of the same stuff, check out Descartes' Discourse on the Method. Much the same stuff, um, but it's more like a treatise than it is a series of meditations by the fireside in the evening, right? Um, Descartes thinks the exact same way that I do. LOL. I think it was really nice to follow exact process to get a conclusion. I agree, and I like the meditations. They're fun. They're fun to read, but they might not be for everybody. And maybe the discourses aren't for everybody. But if you want something that's a little bit less stream of consciousness, again, the discourse on the method is great. And it's also not terribly long. I mean, I think it's a bit longer than the meditations, but you can get through it in an afternoon if you're dedicated. Um, or read one book at a time. Yeah, he brought up doubts. He has the phantom limb thing. Yes, that's good. Um, yeah, yeah, it's a real deep dive. I mean, what he's doing there, and this is why come here, you. This is why I wanted you guys to read it as a supplemental reading. Um, His project is really to establish certainty within the sciences. So not just philosophy. Remember, like nowadays we regard Descartes as a philosopher, like straightforwardly as a philosopher. But at the time Descartes was living and working, a philosopher, a natural philosopher, was what we would call a scientist today. And so Descartes is working at a time where there are all these new discoveries being made, and and with that comes a sort of new way of looking at the world, um, uh, a materialistic way of looking at the world, where everything is matter and motion, governed by the laws of nature, the clockwork universe, if you like. Right. And so Descartes working at a time where science, especially physics, but other things like, biology and stuff, they're moving away from the Aristotelian view of the universe. We're moving away from Aristotle's physics and closer toward um, physics as we know it today. And so what Descartes wants to do is establish how he can be certain of of anything. We're finding out all this new stuff. We're looking at the world in new ways. How can we be sure of what we actually know? And so that's what Descartes is trying to do in the discourses and in the meditations. He's systematically doubting everything until he finds this one indubitable thing, which is that he is a thinking thing. And then he builds everything back up from there. Descartes is what epistemologists call a foundationalist. So he's got his epistemic foundation, the cogito, I think, therefore I am, and he can build up his knowledge, build up his certainty from there. And so he can be sure of what he learns from the sciences. Um, yeah, he exists as long as he's thinking. Well, how long do things exist for? Oh, so Grant, is that Grant? Yeah, that's Grant. So Grant with ADHD, and your thoughts are going this way and that way. Um, um, well, for as long as he is thinking, I mean, and I read that as for as long as he's reasoning, um, or even, doing anything mental. Descartes seems to apply concepts like thinking, like mentality, quite broadly. So it's not like you have to be thinking about something, and if you don't think, you pop out of existence or something, right? But anything mental, as long as you're doing that kind of thing, even if you're dreaming or being deceived by an evil genius, um, you're still thinking. Again, there are probably people out there who know a hell of a lot more about Descartes than I do, who might give you a different spin on this, but that's how I understand it. Um, yeah, there's too much to cover, but he covers the important stuff. Um, a priori knowledge, a posteriori knowledge, um, knowledge generated by the sciences, knowledge of God's existence. Like he covers all the important stuff that he thought he had to get through. And if you want to know more about what he says about mathematics or about natural philosophy, there are other works that you can, of course, check out. But that's cool. I'm glad some of you checked it out because it really is a good read. Now we start with Kim. So this chapter is called Mind as Immaterial Substance. For Descartes, that meant um, mind as a thinking substance, an immaterial thinking substance, or a soul. So, and this idea, as I've sort of intimated it at other points in my lectures, is pretty old. Right? Plato thought that having a mind meant having an immortal soul. You have a soul, and the soul has various parts to it, or various, aspects, or whatever. You've got a rational soul, the logistikon, the part of the soul with logos. Um, you've got the part of the soul with thumos. So that's like your spirited soul, the passions, the emotions, etc. And then you have the part of the soul that has eros. So that's drives, desires, urges, those sorts of things. And I mentioned one of Plato's dialogues, the Phaedo, which recounts the last hours of Socrates' life before he drinks the poison. Because he's sentenced to death for corrupting the youth of Athens, right? So, got to drink the poison. Um, and his friends are really worried. What's going to happen to you, Socrates? You'll be dead. We're going to miss you. And then Socrates is telling his friends, like, don't worry. Like, the soul will survive my body's death, and really, I'll get to do philosophy in its purest form. And he gives them these four arguments for the immortality of the soul. It's a bit different with Aristotle, right? Again, with Aristotle, the soul is an organizing principle, not like a spirit. Um, so, for Aristotle, you have a soul, but like Plato, I mean, it's really more accurate to say that you are your soul. For Plato, it's an immaterial entity that is essentially you. Your body is not essentially you. Your body is made of matter. It's corruptible. It will get old and die. It can suffer injury, disease, etc. But the soul is not like that. The soul is immaterial. It's divine. It's imperishable. It will continue to exist forever. So that's what you really are, according to Plato. Aristotle, you are also your soul, but your soul isn't a spirit that leaves your body after you die. Rather, the soul is the form of a living body. It's like, I could take all of the material that makes up a human being, water, carbon, iron, calcium, magnesium, et cetera, in the amounts that humans have. I can throw it all in a big old bucket, and I will not get a human being. I will get a bucket of goo. But if that matter is organized the right way, then I have a human being. That's what the soul is for Aristotle. Um, for Plato, at least, and this is Plato here. This is from the School of Athens by Raphael. You've probably seen this painting. Maybe you've seen it in person. Maybe you've seen it in a book or on the internet. But this is from a painting by Raphael, the School of Athens. And here's Plato right here. He's pointing up because he's the idealist, or or the Platonic realist. Let's not get into that. Plato is the rationalist, pointing up. Aristotle is the empiricist, pointing down at the world. Why is Plato pointing up? Well, the forms, they're up there in this world of forms, and they're the most real things. Your soul is immortal because it participates in the form of life. So it can't die. Um, your body can die, but your soul won't. And this idea that the soul or the mind and the body are entirely different from one another. Here we've got like at least with Plato, we've got a material body and a spiritual soul. That's a sort of mind-body dualism. We'll see something very similar in Descartes. We call it substance dualism, Cartesian substance dualism. Here, the mind is a thing that thinks. um, or a thinking thing, a sum res cogitans. The body is something that is extended in space, takes up space, it has mass, persists over time. It's a sum res extensa, a thing with extension, a being with extension. So that's mind-body dualism. Mind-body dualism is also a pretty common folk belief too. Um, After all, we did discuss this previously, but mind-body dualism you find in a lot of the world's religions. A lot of the world's religious traditions, there's a sort of mind-body dualism. And as I remarked briefly previously, I think it's kind of natural for us to develop as dualists. You know, Kim kind of sort of gestures at this, and I tried to expand upon it when we were looking at chapter one. But as we grow up and our brains develop, we learn to see the world in terms of things that are alive and not alive. And of the things that are alive, we kind of view them as things with minds versus things without minds. Um, so it's a very common folk notion. It's like a natural way for us to look at the world, right? There are living things and non-living things. There are thinking things and non-thinking things. We'll see a lot of that in Descartes. So Descartes, again, as I said, his dualism is a sort of substance dualism, or the particular form of which we often call Cartesian dualism. A few other things about Descartes, just so that you know a bit more about him. He's known as the father of modern philosophy in the European tradition. Um, he's the originator of rationalism in early modern Europe. So rationalism is an epistemological view on which knowledge is primarily achieved or acquired by the exercise of reason or the intellect. It's opposed to empiricism, which says that the source of knowledge is ultimately sense experience. This isn't an epistemology class, so we won't get too far into the weeds there, but I think that's an important distinction to keep in mind. Descartes was born in France. In fact, the town where he was born is now known as Descartes. Um, I cannot remember what it was known as before, but it is in fact now known as Descartes, France. But he did spend a lot of his adult life in the Netherlands. He was educated in theology at Jesuit college, I believe at the Sorbonne. He also studied law in university. Um, Natural philosopher, mathematician, and died at a relatively young age. He died in 1650 while he was serving as the tutor to Queen Christina of Sweden. Um, you know, Queen Christina really liked to have her philosophy lessons really early in the morning, and you know, it's in Sweden, so it's cold, it's dark. Um, Descartes, we can imagine him trudging up the steps of the castle. It's all cold and dark, and I suppose he contracted pneumonia. Um, and unfortunately, that spelled his demise. Um, so he was a teacher of Queen Christina and also of Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia, who had some issues with the substance dualism that we're going to learn about today. So we'll look at Princess Elizabeth versus Descartes in their correspondence um, to see where that disagreement originated from. All right, so Kim characterizes Descartes' dualism as an interactionist substance dualism. So we've got two different substances that somehow interact. We've got minds and we've got bodies, and somehow they interact with one another. Now, what is a substance? A substance doesn't mean what it means when we use that term in our like everyday vernacular. When philosophers talk about substance, they usually have a couple pretty specific things in mind. One way to understand a substance is something in which properties inhere. Or we can say that substances are that which properties are predicable to. So take the coffee cup. It has properties like it is solid, it is white, it has volume, it has mass, right? And so I can say things of the coffee cup, like the coffee cup is white, the coffee cup is full of coffee. There I'm predicating properties, white, full of coffee, to the cup, right? So a substance is whatever properties are predicable to, or they are that in which properties inhere. Another way of thinking about substances is as that which can exist independently. And you can relate this to the property view, right? Um, in order to have volume, well, I need something that has volume, right? This has a volume of, I don't know, it's probably around a cup, probably around 250 milliliters, say. So having a volume of 250 milliliters, you can't just have that without a substance that has that property. So properties cannot exist independently. They need a substance within which they inhere. But substances can exist independently. And for Descartes, there are two kinds of substances: mind or soul, res cogitans, thinking substance, and bodies or res extensa, that is extended substance. And again, for Descartes, bodies refers to the human body, but also just objects in the world. So I have a body, sure. This computer that I'm talking to you on is a body in the sense that it's an object made of matter. And again, this is an interactionist form of dualism because these two substances are supposed to interact with one another. How did Descartes think this works? Well, there's matter in motion out there in the world, right? Remember, we're at a very materialist, mechanistic time in natural philosophy, and there's all this matter in motion out there in the world, and some of that matter affects our sense organs, which in turn affects our nervous system. And within our nervous system, Descartes thought we had something called animal spirits. Think of it like a fluid that flows through your nerves. This is not how signals are transmitted through our nerves, obviously. Now we know it's an electrochemical process. But Descartes imagined it was something like almost like a hydraulic sort of process where mechanical effects occur to our sense organs. So, light hits my eyes, moves my nerves and animal spirits, which affects the brain, which affects the pineal gland, which is a gland in the brain that Descartes thought was the locus of interaction between the soul and the body. Likewise, the soul can affect the body. So I can say, hey, I'll raise my hand. I have a question for Professor Redstone. I'll raise my hand. Okay, well, my soul goes, raise your hand, which affects the pineal gland, which affects the animal spirits and the nerves and the muscles, such that my hand goes up. So there's a sort of two-way interaction that Descartes imagined happening between an immaterial thinking substance and a material extended non-thinking substance. Okay, I think we have a question in the chat. So the property of the wax was changeable. It can't exist without the wax. Oh, you mean the wax exercise? Yeah. So, well, the wax exercise is not so much about properties. I mean, you could say that the wax is changeable, but chiefly what makes it material is the property of extension, Descartes would say. But the purpose of the wax exercise is actually to show that the nature of things is better known via the intellect, right? Like, because Descartes has this piece of wax and it's solid, and if he goes with his senses, he can knock it and it's solid, smells a bit like beeswax. Okay, puts it by the fire, but it melts and expands. If he were relying purely on knowledge from sense experience, he might be led to conclude that the solid wax and the melted wax are two different kinds of material, but he knows, thanks to his intellect, that it's the same wax. So that's what the wax exercise is meant to demonstrate, that knowledge is gained by the exercise of the intellect rather than with sense experience. Matthew says, I'm a bit confused as to where the brain comes in this understanding. If the soul is housed in the brain, is the soul housed in the brain to Descartes, or is it a part of the body and extended substance? Well, the brain is extended substance. The soul is non-extended substance. Where is the soul? Great question. This is why philosophers don't really take, well, some do, but not many. Many philosophers do not take seriously the possibility of interactionist substance dualism because where is the soul? Oh, there's my dog. Kim gets into this a little bit at the end of the chapter, right? Can we locate an immaterial soul in space? Not really. Um, uh, or as Gilbert Ryle said, right? What it like, this Cartesian soul is like he called it the dogma of the ghost in the machine, as if the body is a machine and the soul is a spirit that inhabits it. Is that how it works? We don't really get a clear answer from Descartes, and it's also difficult to make sense of souls that are located in particular places if they're non-extended, right? If they're immaterial, how can there be a soul in space and time? That's one of the problems with dualism. So it's good that you brought that up, and maybe we'll be able to answer some of those questions as we get to the end of the lecture. I hope my dog barking isn't too distracting. Can you guys hear that? Come here, you. Tula, come here. Come here. Come here. Okay, good. Okay, good. I'll just try and ignore it. The in-laws are having choir practice upstairs, so I need to dog sit. Did he have any reasoning for thinking the pineal gland was the seat of the soul? I'm not sure. I always kind of imagined, and I don't know if this is, I don't know. You'll have to take this with a grain of salt. It could just be my like Descartes headcanon. But the brain is like, symmetrical, right? Yeah, apparently she wants to. She's not good at it though. Come here, you. Come here. Come here, Toots. Come here, baby. Oh. So the brain, you've got two hemispheres and they're kind of like they appear like mirror images of one another, right? But there's only one pineal gland in there. So maybe he thought that because there's this sort of bilateral symmetry in the brain, with the exception of the pineal gland, that might be where it happens. But I can't really say for certain. I'm going to try and go get that dog to come over here. Um, bear with me. Tula, come here. Come here, you. You're barking. You're being distracting. Oh, wait. Oh, no. Well, that didn't work. All right. Well, I guess I'll just have to kind of deal with that. We'll see if maybe she'll tire herself out and sit with me, and then you'll get a good look. Tula, want a treat? Want a treat? Want a treat? Want a treat? She knows I don't really have any treats. Come here. Oh, come here, you. Come here. Will you stay with me? Will you stay here? Will you stay here and not bark? No, no. Anyway, that's the dog. Oh, rah, rah. I know. Okay, sit. No, 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 no. Oh, I give up. Okay, I give up. All right. Well, just as long as you all can't hear it. She's cute, yeah, but she's also loud. All right. So these are the tenets of Descartes' substance dualism that Kim spells out yeah, on page 34. So we've got these two fundamentally different kinds of substances. There's mental substance, material substance, minds and bodies, respectively. The essential nature of a mind is to think and to be conscious, engage in other mental activities, but the essential nature of a body is to have spatial extension, or what Kim calls a bulk. Come here, come here, come here. Yeah, you're getting tired of barking now. A human being is a union, as Descartes put it, of a mind and a body. And minds are diverse from bodies. So no mind is identical with a body. You see this especially in the second meditation. Descartes identifies himself with his mind. Whatever he is, he is a thinking thing. That's essentially what he is. He is not essentially his body. He is not identical with his body. Again, you can think of Plato's view, or you can think of the Abrahamic religions on the soul. Come here, come here. Um, where what you essentially are is your soul, not your body. And finally, minds and bodies causally influence one another. Some mental phenomena are the causes of physical phenomena. So, willing myself to raise my hand and then raising my hand. And some physical phenomena are the cause of mental phenomena. Like I smell this coffee and I get some coffee molecules up in my olfactory system and I experience the aroma of coffee. Now, the question is, if one, two, and three are true, can they work with four? And so that's kind of what we'll immediately deal with. And then we'll kind of ask whether it's really plausible that there are two different kinds of substances at all. Hey, Tula, do you want a treat? Come here, baby. Come here. Come here. The treat is pets. Yes, I'll give you pets if you be quiet. Oh, no. Okay. Well, a little more background on on the stuff from the meditations. Um, as I said earlier, what Descartes is really trying to do here is systematically or methodologically subject all of his beliefs to doubt. Um, so he first does this with the dream argument. And again, we don't have to, it's not an epistemology class, so I don't expect you to know this in detail. But the gist of the dream argument is that, um, sometimes Descartes has dreams where he's, I don't know, sitting by the fire, meditating on first philosophy. But actually, of course, he's laying in bed, asleep. Um, and that leads Descartes to conclude that um, we cannot rely on the senses to accurately represent the world. Now, this is not a matter of, the senses sometimes deceiving us, right? Sure, there are, perceptual illusions and things like that we're subject to, but that's not why we shouldn't trust the senses. We shouldn't trust the senses because really there's no reliable way to know whether you're dreaming or whether you're awake. And therefore, there is no reliable way to know whether your senses are actually representing the world the way it is. So that's why we don't trust the senses. Then we get to the evil genius argument where there's this deceiver who's deceiving us about everything. So, the dream argument deals with knowledge from the senses. The demon argument deals with a priori knowledge, or knowledge from the intellect. And in the second meditation, Descartes says, but there is a supremely powerful and cunning deceiver who deliberately deceives me all the time. Even then, if he is deceiving me, I undoubtedly exist. Let him deceive me all he can. He will never bring it about that I am nothing while I think I am something. So after thoroughly thinking the matter through, I conclude that this proposition, I exist, must be true whenever I assert it or think it. And this is the cogito, right? Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. So where the dream argument is meant to um, motivate the idea that we cannot gain knowledge from sense experience, the demon argument targets a priori knowledge, knowledge that's had independently of sense experience. So we're talking like deductive reasoning, um, mathematics. Like this evil genius could even deceive Descartes about triangles having three sides. Like, Descartes might think, well, it's obvious if you think about it rationally, a triangle necessarily has three sides. But this demon is so powerful, he could even be deceiving Descartes about that. Maybe triangles don't have three sides, right? But he can deceive Descartes all he wants. As long as Descartes exists, as long as he thinks he exists, because he cannot be deceived about the fact that he exists. That's this epistemic bedrock. And it's also what establishes that Descartes is ultimately, at bottom, a thinking thing. He's not identical with his body. He doesn't think any part of his body, namely the brain, does the thinking. It's the soul that does the thinking. Tula, it's really getting distracting, Tula. Can you come over here, please? Come here. Tula, come here. Come here, you. I'll give you a treat. I'll give you a treat if you come lie down. Yeah, come on. Come here. Come here, baby. Come on. Come on, you little pupper. All right. Let's look at some of the arguments that Kim sketches out here. Tula, come here. Please. Please, I beg you. I beg you. Come here. I'll give you a treat. One treat. One treat. Come here. Come here. Oh, well, I give up. Okay, these arguments that we're about to look at are epistemic arguments. They're epistemic arguments because they deal with knowledge. So remember, epistemology is like theory of knowledge, study of knowledge. These are arguments that deal with knowledge. No, it's true. I am the yeah. I bork, therefore I am. Okay, that's enough. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. No. Oh, usually she's tired herself out by now. That's the thing about Chihuahuas. They bark. Okay, argument one. I've added the premises and the markers for premises and conclusions here to try and make this a little clearer. Um, but this is how argument one goes. I am such that my existence cannot be doubted. My body is not such that its existence cannot be doubted. So let's make sure we understand the first two premises. Descartes is a thinking thing. Um, let him deceive me all he like. When I think or utter I exist, it must necessarily be true. So he's established the one indubitable thing, the cogito. He cannot doubt his existence so long as he is thinking. That's what premise one says. But the premise two says that bodies are not like that. His body is not such that its existence cannot be doubted. He can doubt the existence of his body. Maybe he thinks he has a body, looks at his hands, but it's a dream, right? So he can doubt the existence of the body. And since there's an epistemic difference between uh, the existence of the body and the existence of the mind, uh, the existence of the mind is not something that can be doubted. It's something he can know with certainty, and this is not true with the body. So because of that little epistemic difference, we get the first conclusion, I am not identical with my body. And the second conclusion, therefore, the thinking thing that I am, that is my mind, is not identical with my body. Now, what do you make of this? Do you find it convincing? Tula, come here. Come here. Come lie down. Come lie down. Come on. Go lie down. Here. Go lie down. Come here. Come here. Come here. No. Come here. Come here, you. Come here. I got you. I mean, do you think that there's a. Oh, no. Stop barking. Do you think that this difference in what is knowable about minds and bodies entails that minds and bodies are distinct in this way? So, Matthew, the idea is that we cannot doubt the existence of the mind, or whatever Descartes really is something whose existence he cannot doubt. Like I am, I exist is necessarily true, but my body exists is not the same. It's uh, doubtable, right? You could doubt the existence of your body. Think about it. You could be dreaming right now. You look at your hands and think, yes, this is my body, but you're dreaming. This is not your body. It's just a dream. Or you could be a brain in a vat, right? Like Hillary Putnam has us imagine. You could be a brain in a vat being kept alive in this nutrient solution, and maybe there are electrodes hooked up to you, and it makes you experience yourself as having a body, but you're just a brain in a vat, right? Or the Matrix. Have you guys seen the Matrix? Whenever I talk about Descartes, inevitably the Matrix comes up. Tula. So, Neo thinks when he's in the Matrix, like, this is my body. But then when he's pulled out of the Matrix, he's all weak and covered in goop. And, he says to Morpheus, why do my eyes hurt? And Morpheus is like, you've never used them before, right? Or when they're practicing in the dojo, right? Like, you think that's air you're breathing now? No, it's all a computer simulation. So we can doubt the body, but Descartes thinks we cannot doubt our own existence. So whatever we are, we must not be identical with our bodies, but with our minds, a thinking substance. Okay. Grant says, how much do we want to depend on the word doubt? Well, doubt here is this is this is the kind of doubt that we're talking about when we talk about scientific skepticism. And a lot of that is due to Descartes, right? Think about when we run a scientific experiment, we don't try and verify. What we do is try and falsify. And if we fail to falsify, then we get that's what we want. That's a successful result. Descartes is kind of doing something like that here. He's doubting everything, and if he's failing to show that something is false, good. We keep that as part of our beliefs, right? Kira says it seems to prove the mind and the body are not the same substance, but it doesn't prove the mind is a substance. Yeah, fair. I would say, I would put it this way, Kara. I would say it seems to show that the mind and the body are distinct, but maybe not in the way that Descartes wants necessarily, right? Maybe they're distinct not in terms of substances, but in terms of properties, for example. Cole says, it's convincing for the time, but with modern research on the brain, it doesn't follow through in terms of a conclusion. For example, if your brain is damaged, which is your body, your mind is changed, even if you can doubt your body. Yeah, yeah. And Descartes might put this down to a difference in the material interactions that are going on in the body. Um, like he has a lot to say about phantom limbs. Like if how is it that I continue to experience a hand that's been amputated? Well, it's because of mechanical interactions in the body, ultimately. Anyways, um, so interesting, right? This is an interesting argument. I'll leave it to you whether you think it's convincing or not. And by the way, one of the things that I will say more about in my little instructional video for your reflection assignments, these are the kinds of things you might want to pick to engage with, right? I'm going to say pick something from what we've learned so far and critically engage with it. That means in part one, you're going to spell it out, explain it, and part two, respond to it. And these arguments are perfect for that. So just keep that in mind. Argument two, another epistemic argument. Tula, come here. Come here. Come lie down. Come lie down. Come here. You want a treat? Want a treat? Want a treat? I'll give you pets. No, no, come here. I'm just going to give you pets. Come here, baby. I'll give you pets. She doubts me. Come here, you. Come here. Come here. Come lie down. Come here. Okay, so argument two. Premise one, my mind is transparent to me. That is, nothing can be in my mind without my knowing that it is there. My body is not transparent to me in the same way. Therefore, my mind is not identical with my body. So what Kim says is that, the first premise is pretty strong, maybe unreasonably strong. After all, there can be plenty of things in your mind without you knowing that they're there. What about like unconscious things? What about memories? Right? So maybe we need something a little bit less strong. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Um, so uh maybe we need something less restrictive. I mean, things that you're thinking about might be transparent to you in that way, uh, but not the entire mind, right? This is why people go to therapy, um, right? And cognitive dissonance can prevent you from evaluating things properly. Yeah, like you might know there are beliefs there, but ignore them. Although that's not quite what this is saying. But let's not worry about that. Tula, please, I'm begging you. You've got to stop. Come here. Now, the point is just that even if it's not the case that nothing can be in your mind without you knowing that it's there. Like there are plenty of things going in your mind that you're not aware of. Um, but at the very least, maybe the contents of the mind are transparent in a way that the body is not. I think Kim says that, we're in a good position to know what's in our minds. A physician or a dentist or something like that is in a better position to know what's going on with your body. Therefore, the mind is not identical with the body. So, what do you make of this argument? Again, it's an epistemic argument. I guess the important thing is that here the body is not transparent to us in the way that the contents of our minds are transparent to us, so that and because of this epistemic difference, they're not the same thing. Mm-hmm. Well, sure, it's valid. The question is whether it's sound. You know, like if P1 and P true are two, that and then C necessarily follows. But the question we don't, the problem with arguments is that they can be perfectly valid, but the premises need to be true as well. They need to be sound. Um, and perhaps we can deny, or we just might not be impressed with the claim in P1. So that's good. That's always something to keep in mind. Soundness and validity. Any other thoughts? If not, that's fine. We can move on. Argument three is kind of similar to argument two. The first premise says that each mind is such that there is a unique subject who has direct access to its contents. But premise two claims that no material body has a specially privileged knower. Knowledge of material things is in principle public and intersubjective. This is something in the philosophy of science that we call intersubjective intersubjective um, I think verifiability or availability. Knowledge of objective knowledge is public knowledge. Subjective knowledge is private. So, I mean, we can all go and, I don't know, I guess observe like Dunton Tower on the Carleton campus and look at it, come to know what it looks like. So we could know where it is, what its dimensions, all of these publicly observable things. But the contents of our own mind are not like that. They're only known by the thinker who thinks them. Well, it would be EEG, and I don't think we would use it for that particular purpose because the spatial resolution isn't good enough. But you're right with a caveat, and the caveat is that we're kind of organizing the outputs of those scans. Um, I mean, what you're seeing there, like but let's say in principle, like just sci-fi sort of example, when and this gets us back to some of the problems we looked at before. If I scan your brain, am I really directly reading your thoughts? No, I'm not. Um, I'm 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 observing and then representing uh physical events in the brain. Okay, lots of questions. What about pain thresholds? What about pain thresholds, Tara? I'm not like like how people have different pain thresholds. I'm not really sure what the question is. Um, okay, I think here too it doesn't follow through to the conclusion. You could make a computer, for example, that generates a random number that only it knows. That doesn't mean it has a mind. Yeah, that's fair. Um, but maybe, I mean, maybe the contents of artificial minds could also be private. That means there might still be an epistemic difference between the contents of a mind and publicly observable facts or publicly observable states of affairs in the world. But maybe it's not enough to show that we're talking about different substances here. What about the idea that we know our own bodies best? Sure, but okay, like let's say I feel hungry. Um, that's a way of representing of my representing that my body needs food, but hunger is a mental state. Like there's physiological correlates, but the experience of hunger is a mental state. And it's that mental state that you are a privileged knower of. Yeah. Well, again, Kira, like uh these are just to sort of flesh out Descartes' claims. Um Here just a subject means a subject to whom thoughts, experiences, etc. occur. Yeah, well, again, it is, but the pain is a mental state. Like there's a physiological state like tissue damage, C fibers firing, etc., but the experience of pain is a mental event. That's the distinction. So again, I get the impression that we're not really buying this argument, right? And that's okay. You know, one thing I think it's important to get out of the way here is that epistemic arguments are a little tricky. And that's because it's really hard to use epistemic properties to differentiate things. It's hard to use the nature of knowledge to try and show that there are like actual important differences between things, metaphysical differences in this case. So, uh, Kim writes here, to show that x does not equal y, it is necessary and sufficient to come up with a single property p, such that x has p but y lacks it, or y has p but x lacks it. Such a property p can be called a differential property for x and y. The question then is whether epistemic properties, like being known with certainty, etc., can be used as a differential property. So let's make sure we understand the idea of differential properties. Okay, let's try and think of some objects and come up with a differential property. So I need an x, a y, and a p. Nothing, huh? Well, see what kind of random objects are in the room. Nothing within arm's reach. Oh, someone's got something maybe in the chat. A pickle, me, and alive. Good. So a pickle, I mean, well, pickles were alive at one point when it was a cucumber, but now it's not. Although, I don't know, if you use lactofermentation, it's kind of alive because it's got bacterial culture in it. But I take your point. We'll use a pickle. So, what is one of the reasons why Grant is not identical with a pickle? Well, Grant is alive and the pickle is not. Or the rock is inanimate and Grant is animate. That is one differential property between Grant and rocks and pickles. Um, Now the question is whether these epistemic properties can play that role. Can being known or being believed work as a differential property? And Kim is skeptical. Do you remember the example that he uses in this part of the book? Anyone remember? This is how I check if we're doing our readings. I'll just tell you. Well, that's more about necessary identities, but that's good, Tara. This one, the example that I'm looking for, is the driver of the SUV. So the driver of the black SUV is known to the police as the guy who hit the pedestrian. But for Kim, the driver of the black SUV is his neighbor, is known to Kim as his neighbor, not as the man who hit the pedestrian. Now, does that mean that Kim's neighbor and this hit and run guy are different? No, it turns out in Kim's example, the driver of the black SUV that's known to the police as the hit and run driver and that's known to Kim as his neighbor are in fact the same driver. Or another example. Okay, so Lois Lane knows that Clark Kent is Clark Kent, right? But Lois Lane does not know that Clark Kent is Superman. Superman is not known to Lois Lane as Clark Kent. Therefore, Superman is not Clark Kent. Does that work? Of course it doesn't. Superman is Clark Kent. So, do epistemic properties work as differential properties? Kim is skeptical. Yeah, and I am as well, as I think these examples show. All right. Now we're going to get on to the metaphysical arguments. We'll cover a couple of these and then I think we'll pause for a brain break. So the next set of arguments, these are all the metaphysical arguments because rather than dealing with knowledge, they deal with what kinds of things exist and what those things are like. So they deal with minds and bodies. Do those exist? Well, pretty sure they do. And what are they like? Are bodies material and minds immaterial? Or are bodies and minds both material, as the physicalists say? Or are minds and bodies both mental, as the idealists would say, right? So metaphysical arguments as opposed to epistemic arguments. Uh, well, if could it be the glasses? Therefore, the hit and run suspect is not my neighbor since they do not wear glasses because glasses can be worn and not. Well, sure, I guess, but in this, so wearing glasses could be a differential property, but not in this case because, like as Kim has described it, the guy in the black SUV that hit the pedestrian is Kim's neighbor. Like he is, it's the same person. But he's known to the police as the hit and run driver and not known to Kim as the hit and run driver. That doesn't make him a different person, right? It's the same person in this scenario. Essential nature, like the essence of something, the fundamental characteristic that makes a thing what it is. So, um, if we're talking about substances like res cogitans, its essential nature is that it is a thinking substance. That's what makes it what it is. Um, so yeah, like a purpose. Yeah, like you say, like it doesn't have to be a purpose, but a fundamental defining characteristic. Yeah. So argument 4 says, first premise, my essential nature is to be a thinking thing. I am, I exist. I think, therefore I am. Blah, 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 blah. That's what Descartes thinks that he fundamentally, essentially is, a thinking thing. But, premise 2, my body's essential nature is to be an extended thing in space, not a thinking thing. Therefore, my essential nature, because Descartes is essentially a thing that thinks and not a body, his essential nature does not include being an extended thing in space. And the conclusion that follows is he is not identical with his body because he is a thinking thing, a mind, and his body is his mind is not identical with his body. What do we think? I've put a little note that there's a conceivability argument at play here, but I'll be honest, I forgot why I put that there. I think it's whether we can conceive of a mind without a body or a body without a mind. Descartes can conceive of of both. He can conceive of both of these. He can conceive that he is a thinking thing and therefore not identical with his body. Um, and he can also conceive of bodies without minds, so inanimate objects, and also non-human animals for Descartes. Yeah. Uh, they could be different concepts. Read that more closely. I think, like, yes, they're different concepts, but not. Maybe we conceptualize minds and bodies differently, but that doesn't mean they're different substances. I think is that what you mean, Kira? Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. I need to. It's bothering me. I need to go find that conceivability argument. Is there a school of thought that would argue that your body is a reflection of your mind? The idealists, I guess, subjective idealists would say that there are no physical objects. Everything is mental, or that the mind needs a body. Yeah, the embodied cognition people would argue that. But it's bothering me. I need to find it. So I'm going to open up the textbook. Excuse me while I look this up. Okay, let's try and find argument four. So he goes through how we could defend each of the. Oh yeah, whether we. Yeah, it's like I said, whether we can conceive of something without a body, um, and um, and uh, and Kim points out that there's a difference between conceivability and possibility. Um, okay, that's pretty straightforward. That we don't need to spin our wheels too much there. But conceivability arguments can be tricky. I guess I will kind of reiterate what I just said. Conceivability arguments are tricky. Conceivability arguments generally make a move like this. They'll say, like, X is conceivable, therefore X is possible. And if X is possible, then there might be some possible world out there where X is true, and great. So that's great for us. X is true. Um, I guess this really depends on whether you can conceive um, of minds existing without bodies. And remember, body does not mean just your body. You could say my mind could exist without a body. I could upload it to a computer. The computer is a body. The computer is a physical object, right? I do think that the essential nature does need to be an extended thing in space because I can't conceive a mind without space, even if it is a substance. Yeah, yeah. Like a mind, if you don't think of mind as you might not be able to conceive of mind as an unextended thinking substance. Maybe the mind is what the brain does, right? So the mind is like realized within a physical thing. And then you're not a substance dualist, but maybe you're a property dualist, right? Exactly. We can conceive of it being possible, but that doesn't mean it actually exists. The example Kim uses is like, look, we can conceive of traveling faster than the speed of light. I'll go watch some Star Trek, and like, okay, warp speed, boom, faster than light. It's perfectly conceivable. As far as we know, it is impossible. You cannot go faster than the speed of light. It's the fastest speed there is. It's the cosmic speed limit. We can conceive of traveling backwards in time, but as far as we know, that's not possible, right? So just because something is conceivable does not follow that it's possible. So, okay, maybe we can conceive of a mind existing without a body. Doesn't mean it's possible. Okay, it's 3:45. I say we take a 15-minute brain break because all that dog barking, that was a lot. I'm glad you guys couldn't hear it, but I sure could, and my brain hurts. So how about we come back at 4, and then we'll finish off the we'll do this one, argument 5, and then we'll cover the rest of the chapter. I mean, we are kind of skipping through this pretty quickly. Yes, I will re-explain that when I get back. I'm skipping through this quickly because Kim discusses like each premise of each of these arguments in quite a lot of detail. I don't want to get we'd be here all day if we did that, but I hope we're hitting the main points. But I'll see you all at 4. All right. Okay. So now we're back from our brain break. Uh Terrence wanted me to re-explain the Superman example. Okay, so that was meant to illustrate um, the difficulty with using epistemic properties as differential properties. So a differential property is a property that X has but Y lacks, or that Y has but X lacks, which differentiates X and Y. So can epistemic properties like being known as or being believed to be work as differential properties? Kim uses the black SUV as an example, but I'll use Superman. Okay, so we all know that Clark Kent is Superman, right? But say you're Lois Lane and you don't know that Clark Kent is Superman. You only know that Clark Kent is Clark Kent. We can see pretty straightforwardly that just because Clark Kent is known to Lois Lane as Superman, and Superman is known as Superman, but Superman is not known as Clark Kent, does not differentiate Clark Kent from Superman because they're the same individual. Make sense? All right. Perfect. Good. Okay, argument 5. This is another metaphysical argument. If anything is material, the first premise claims, it is essentially material. So, pretty straightforward. But the second premise says, I am possibly immaterial. That is, there is a possible world in which I exist without a body. Therefore, I am not essentially material, and it follows with the first premise that I am not material. So again, this is a modal argument. Um, Here we're dealing with what is logically possible. There's a logically possible world in which I exist without a body. There could still be a conceivability argument at play here in imagining this possible world where I possibly exist without a body. But if that's conceivable and if that is logically possible, then it follows that I am not essentially material. And it's a modal argument. Again, modal arguments deal with logically possible worlds. So, what do you make of this argument? I suppose we can say that, well, if there is a conceivability argument at play, there's the worry that just because something is conceivable does not mean it's possible. But then Kim spends most of his discussion on whether there is a possible world where I exist without a body. And that's where the Cicero Tully stuff comes in. Is there a possible world where Cicero was not Tully? No, there is not. Because Cicero and Tully, this is like a case of necessary identity. And it might also be the case that, um, well, it's questionable whether this is the case with the mind as well, right? So modal arguments can be a bit weird. Um, so if you don't have too many thoughts on this one, we can move on. And any questions concerning argument 5 at all before we do argument 6? Oh, excuse me. I have yawned. Oh. This argument's a little bit more fun. Argument 6. So just suppose, for argument's sake, that I am identical with the body of mine, this body that I have. But in 2001, this body did not exist. I was here. I there was a body, but all of the material that makes up my body now is not the same as the material that made it up in 2001. Because our organs, the cells in our organs regenerate over the years, and all of the material that made up my body in 2001 no longer makes up that body. So it follows from the first premise that I did not exist in 2001, but I did exist in 2001. Perhaps some of you did not exist in 2001. Now that I think of it, probably there are a few of you that did not. Yeah, yeah, that's true, Grant. But bear with me. So this body did not exist in the sense that I'm not composed of the same stuff. So it follows that I did not exist. But hang on. According to the third premise, I did exist in 2001. I remember. I was around in 2001. So there's a contradiction, and the supposition that you're identical with your body must be false. Therefore, you are not identical with your body. Now, what do you make of this? Is there anything that we can do that can solve this problem of continuity? Yeah. Well, look, suppose I am identical with this body I have right now in 2026. But in 2001, this body did not exist, technically, because it was made of different stuff. So this exact body did not exist. And so it follows that I did not exist in 2001, but I did. So there's a contradiction there. Does that make sense, Janet? Yeah, Josh, that's one way to tackle it, right? There's no reason that the you existed in 2001 is the same you is the same you. Well, that's fine if it doesn't. It, think of it as a sub conclusion if you want to. That's fine. Um, but yeah, what can we do to solve the problem of continuity? This is what Kim does. He says, well, really, we're four-dimensional beings. Um, we don't just exist in three-dimensional space, but we also continually exist through time. And the me that I am now is like a slice of that four-dimensional space-time worm that I am. Yeah, and that's fine. That's fine. It could apply to the mind. That's a different way of that. Well, that's really a different argument. Uh, but when it comes to this argument, how can we deal with the problem of continuity? That's how Kim does it with a sort of four-dimensionalist metaphysics, right? Um, Last time someone brought up the ship of Theseus. Who wants to tell me about the ship of Theseus? Yeah, Cole, basically, like, or Timothy, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was like there's a ship and you gradually replace each piece one at a time. And at what point does it become a different ship? Or like if you take the original pieces and reconstruct a new ship, which one is the ship of Theseus?
Yeah,
Something like that.
yeah, exactly. Theseus is a legendary sailor, and according to legend, he's the founder of Athenian democracy. He rescues the youths from the labyrinth, uh, where the Minotaur lives. Right, so he's an important guy. So we want to keep his ship. We want to preserve it as a museum ship. But over time, the parts wear out and need replacing. And of course, the question is it the same ship once all the parts have been replaced? Some people would say, sure, it is. But some people would disagree. Now, we got a similar problem here, right? Is it the ship of Theseus or is it a different ship? Well, is it still me? Is it not me? Um, Well, maybe there's something we can do to kind of solve the problem of continuity. We could do something like what Locke did. Locke thinks that continuity of memory is what makes you the same person you were in the past. But of course, Locke is talking about the mind, not the body. Maybe I just need to continually exist, and maybe I'm a bit like the ship of Theseus that's having all of its parts replaced. Maybe I'm a bit like that. I don't know. Or maybe we could pull like a move like Derek Parfit pulls and say it doesn't really matter, mind or body. It doesn't matter. Um, who cares? What matters is that somebody is there who has a body that's continuous with yours and who has memories and personality traits and characteristics that are continuous with who you were in the past. So who cares if you're identical with your past self? Someone still exists, and that's what ought to matter, right? I kind of have to admit I am quite sympathetic to Parfit's view. Like, am I the same person, mind or body? I don't really think it matters. The point is that I am here now, um, and I'm continuous with whoever that was, whether I am numerically identical with past Josh or not. So who cares? Um, oh, here's the necessary identity one. Cicero Tully type stuff here. So if x equals y, then necessarily x equals y. That is, if x equals y in this world, x equals y in every possible world. Cicero and Tully are the same in every possible world. Hesperus and phosphorus are the same in every possible world. So suppose I'm identical with this body of mine. By the principle of necessary identity, I am necessarily identical with this body. That is, I am identical with it in every possible world. But this is false, the second premise claims, because in some possible worlds I could be disembodied and have no body, or at least I could have a different body in another possible world. So it follows that it is false that I am identical with this body in every possible world, and this contradicts the second line. Therefore, I'm not identical with my body. What do you make of this argument? I mean, to me, this one's a little trickier. Sure, it's I don't know about A. I don't know about being disembodied and have no body, but could I have a different body in another possible world? I don't know. I can imagine maybe there are possible worlds where I'm missing limbs, for example. But I don't know if I could be like a mind in a different body and be the same person. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Kira, like maybe my representations of myself, my body would be different, and maybe that's enough to say that, well, I don't really have the same mind. Again, like think of Locke. Locke has this thought experiment, The Prince and the Cobbler, where a prince's soul enters into the body of a cobbler. And Locke kind of says, well, everybody would agree that the prince is still the prince, even if he's in the cobbler's body. So similar to that, right? Although some people are going to disagree with that. Kim talks about the A being more vulnerable than B. Can you explain why? Um, We'll probably have to go to the text. I should have just left the textbook open. Let's see. Readings. Let's go. Okay. Um, so if there is a vulnerability, well, the principle of necessary, so this is what Kim is saying. The principle of necessary identity is unexceptionable. It's logically necessary that if I am identical with it with or if X is identical with Y, then necessarily that holds in every possible world. That's why it's unexceptionable. Therefore, if there is a problem, it's got to be with A and B. Um, A is vulnerable to criticism because we could say, like, ultimately, I think it's due to the conceivability argument, the nature of conceivability arguments. Why is A more vulnerable to criticism? Well, it's because it's kind of a conceivability argument. Like, it's conceivable that I could exist without a body, therefore it's possible. Well, just because something is conceivable doesn't make it possible. But B is less so because again, the prince and the cobbler, right? We can imagine a scenario like Locke does where the soul of the prince enters the body of the cobbler and we would say that is, or at least that's what Locke would say, that that is the prince in the cobbler's body, right? So that's why A is a little bit more vulnerable than B. Grant says, I'm still sort of confused about the idea of properties that things have, much like the wax, because if my skin color changes in a different world, then my body is different. But the properties of it don't change, do they? Um, so right now we're talking about identity rather than properties. And yeah, could there be another logically possible world where your body has different properties? I would think that would mean that you would be no longer identical with you in this universe. Sure, yeah, I mean, it's not a conceivability argument, but it's a thought experiment. Um, and it's an experiment that so here's what thought experiments do. Thought experiments try and we do them to try and clarify what beliefs or intuitions we actually hold about something. So they're not exactly conceivability arguments. But some people would say, sure, that's conceivable that a that it's the cobbler in the prince's body. That makes sense to me. But some people would say, no, now we've got a whole new person. Maybe the prince has really been psychologically mutilated. His mind has been taken from one body and put into another. These are questions that we are not going to get to the bottom of today because that's like a whole other area of philosophy. But just know that so the Prince and the Cobbler is like a thought experiment rather than a conceivability argument. Okay. Anything else? What do you make of this argument? Because I'm kind of I kind of want to get away from the metaphysics before we run out of time. Let's go to the next one. Boy, Kim has a lot of these arguments. Argument 8. Thoughts and consciousness exist. That's the first premise. Hence, there must be objects or substances to which thoughts and consciousness occur. That is, things that think and are conscious. So premise 2. Thoughts and consciousness cannot occur to material things. They cannot be states of material objects like the brain. Hence, thoughts and consciousness must occur to immaterial things like Cartesian mental substances. Hence, mental substances exist, and they are the things that think and are conscious. and bear other mental properties. Um, this is where we encounter Leibniz's mill. Very interesting thought experiment from Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, the co-discoverer of calculus. In case you were wondering, Newton gets all the credit, but apparently the system of notation that we use to do calculus is actually Leibniz's. So, fun fact. So, what does Leibniz say? It must be confessed that perception and that which depends upon it are inexplicable by mechanical causes, that is, by figures and motions. Supposing there were a machine so constructed as to feel, or to think, feel, and have perception, we could conceive of it as enlarged and yet preserving the same proportions, so that we might enter into it as into a mill. And this granted, we should only find, on visiting it, pieces which push and pull against one another, but never anything by which to explain a perception. This must be sought for, therefore, in the simple substance, and not in the composite or in the machine. Whoops. No, where's my back button? There we go. So that's kind of like what is happening. That's illustrative of the second premise of this argument, right? Thoughts and consciousness exist. Okay, yes, I agree. So there must be objects or substances to which thoughts and consciousness occur. Objects that think, things that are conscious, etc. Okay, no problem. Great. Thoughts and consciousness cannot occur to material things. That's what Leibniz's mill is meant to illustrate. Imagine, if you will, a student in another class last semester put it this way, like, what if you could get on the magic school bus, okay? And you shrink yourself down, and Miss Frizzle takes you into the brain, and you're exploring around in somebody's brain. You would only see neurons firing. You would not see consciousness, right? And that's kind of like what Leibniz is doing with this mill. Imagine we constructed a thinking machine, and we blew it up real big so that we could walk around in it. We'd only see parts moving and pushing and pulling like in a big mill. We wouldn't see perceptions, thoughts, etc. So it must be something else besides the interactions, the physical interactions of the machine. And for Descartes, that's mental substances. For Leibniz, it's a type of substance called monads. But whatever position you take, it's the mental substances that exists, and those are the things that are conscious, bear mental properties, and so forth. Some of you might agree with Leibniz, but some of you might say, especially if you're a physicalist, you might say, no. Maybe we're not dealing with uh, mental substances, but merely mental properties. And that gets us to property dualism, which we'll talk about toward the end of the lecture. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think before we move on to the fight between Princess Elizabeth and Descartes? Let me know what you think. I mean, I'll just put the question to you. Do you think that we need a mental substance to account for the mental, or whether we can do it without that? Hmm. Okay. So you agree with the Cartesian view? Oh, I think it's pretty straightforward. I personally, I would just deny P2. Do you want to move on and talk about the debate between Descartes and Princess Elizabeth? Let's do it. This is Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia with her fancy hat and her hunting spear. She's coming for Descartes' views on the mind and his mind-body dualism. She's armed for battle, and you'll see this is pretty cool what Princess Elizabeth does here. So in the sixth meditation, Descartes said the following. He said, "The mind is not immediately affected by all parts of the body, but only by the brain, and perhaps just one small part of the brain, the pineal gland, namely. Every time this part of the brain is in a given state, it presents the same signals to the mind, even though the other parts of the body may be in a different condition at the time. For example, when the nerves in the foot are set in motion in a violent and unusual manner, this motion, by way of the spinal cord, reaches the inner parts of the brain, and there gives the mind its signal for having a certain sensation, namely the sensation of a pain is occurring in the foot. This stimulates the mind to do its best to get rid of the cause of the pain, which it takes to be harmful to the foot." Okay, I mean, he's doing pretty good here when it comes to the role that pain has. Like pain might represent tissue damage and it's unpleasant, and when we experience a painful stimuli we tend to, like we withdraw from the pain, right? What's causing us pain? Like when you burn your hand on something and you're like ow, and you withdraw your hand right away, right? He doesn't quite have the physiology down, but that's because we didn't know as much about physiology back then than we do now. So, but Descartes thinks it's a mechanical process, right? Something happens to the foot which affects the nerves, the muscles, the animal spirits, which cause changes in the brain, which signals to the soul pain, right? Here in Passions of the Soul, he gets a bit more particular. He says, "And the activity of the soul consists entirely in the fact that simply by willing something it brings it about, that the little gland to which it is closely joined moves in the manner required to produce the effect corresponding to the desire." Here, Descartes is talking about mental causation. So, we can have physical to mental causation. This is mental to physical causation. The soul affects the pineal gland, which affects the brain, which affects the nerves, the muscles, the animal spirits. And as I said earlier, my volition to raise my hand ultimately causes this physical chain reaction, where I actually raise my hand, right? So it's sketched out in these 3 points below this quotation. It starts in the soul, moves to the pineal gland. This causes other things to happen in the nervous system. Um, and it goes both ways. Everybody clear on the mental physical and physical mental picture of causation that Descartes has painted here. I mean, bear in mind, the details are wrong. Descartes seems to have the right idea, but some of the details are wrong. Descartes thinks of the joints as almost like wheels, and the nerves as like strings or cables, the muscles as like pulleys, and they're all told what to do by these animal spirits that flow to and from the brain throughout the nerves, right? We know that's not how it works now, but that's the idea. It's a mechanistic picture of the human body. Like for Descartes, the body was quite literally a very sophisticated natural machine, and the soul was unified with it in some sense. So is everybody clear on that before we move on?
Yep. Yes.
Awesome. So now comes one of Descartes' students, Princess Elizabeth. She takes issue with this picture of mind-body interaction. She wants Descartes to explain the following. Explain, quote, "how the mind of a human being only a thinking substance, can determine the bodily spirits in producing bodily actions. For it appears that all determination of movement is produced by the pushing of the thing being moved, or by the manner in which it is pushed by that which moves it. or else by the qualification and figure of the surface of the latter. Contact is required for the first two conditions, right? For pushing and the manner of it being pushed. And extension is required for the qualification and figure of the surface of the thing doing the pushing. But you entirely exclude the latter, extension, from the notion you have of the soul. And the former, contact, seems incompatible with an immaterial thing. So, Princess Elizabeth is here saying, like, look, you're saying that an immaterial soul pushes and pulls or gets pushed or affected by, right? Concise way of saying it is you're saying that an immaterial soul can causally interact with material elements in the body and vice versa. But we seem to need contact and extension for that to happen, and those are two things you say that the soul doesn't have. So how on earth is this supposed to work, Mr. Descartes? How on earth does an immaterial soul affect a material body? And how does a material body affect an immaterial soul? Please explain, Descartes. Here's what Descartes said. I observe that there are in us certain primitive notions which are, as it were, the originals on the pattern of which we form all of other thoughts. As regards to the mind and body together, we have only the primitive notion of their union, on which depends our notion of the mind's power to move the body, and the body's power to act on the mind and cause sensations and passions. Do you find that satisfactory? Firstly, what's Descartes saying here? He's saying, really, I just take it as a primitive notion or a brute fact that the mind can affect the body and the body can affect the mind or the soul. That's kind of like saying, that's just how it seems to work. Do you find that satisfying? Because Princess Elizabeth didn't. But what do you think? Yeah, because I said it works that way. Other philosophers of the time tried to eliminate this mind body problem, the problem of explaining how the mind can control the body, and how the body can affect the states of mind, mental states, and so forth. Coming from the guy who came up with his own disbelief demon. Yeah. So, oh, well, yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, he is supposed to be a foundationalist, but it's like, where's the foundation for this? I guess Descartes might say, well, it seems to work that way. I just have this primitive notion, and God is not a deceiver, so it's probably true. Um, yeah. Um, but yeah, it's kind of like a brute fact. I mean, if we think of like we can talk about it in terms of Cartesian immaterial substance or Leibniz, right? Like you can if you magic school bus your way into the brain, like walking around in a mill, you'll just see physical parts and physical processes and you won't see anything mental. But Princess Elizabeth is saying like, well, you're saying that the mental can affect the physical or the material, but you're not telling us how, because the things that the mind would need to affect the physical, extension and contact, are things that you say that minds don't have. So how's that supposed to work? Well, it's just a union. It's just this, come on, it's this primitive notion of a union. And maybe if you want to get into the weeds, if you look at the rest of the meditations, Descartes finds the cogito. He's got his foundation, and then he builds back up from there. And one of the things he does is try to establish that God exists and that God is not a deceiver. And so that means that Descartes can trust his clear and distinct ideas. God is not a deceiver. Now it's kind of circular, right? God is not a deceiver. Therefore, I can trust my clear and distinct ideas are accurate and trustworthy. And how do I know? Well, I have a clear and distinct idea of God as not a deceiver. So that's called the Cartesian circle. You can read more about that if you want, or we can talk about it on the Discord server. But I suspect that's what Descartes would probably appeal to here. He might say, well, I just have this clear and distinct idea of the mind body union, and God's not a deceiver, so we're good, right? I don't find that very satisfying, and neither does Princess Elizabeth. And I suspect a lot of you wouldn't find that very satisfying either, right? Like, as Grant says, Descartes been real quiet since Princess Elizabeth dropped this fire. Yeah. I call it a mic drop moment because Elizabeth replied and said, "I admit that it would be easier for me to concede matter and extension to the mind than it would be for me to concede the capacity to move a body and be moved by one to an immaterial thing." This could be the first appearance of the causal argument for materialism or physicalism in modern philosophy. What Elizabeth is saying is that, look, it's easier for me to conceive of the mind as physical or material than to attribute um, the power to affect the material to an immaterial thing. Like boom. What do you think of her response? Are you team Elizabeth or team Descartes? No thoughts? Maybe you've already indicated your thoughts. That's fine. Okay, Cole agrees with Elizabeth. Yeah, I get it. I mean, I think now's a good time to stop and reflect on, why there aren't really that many contemporary defenders of Cartesian dualism. Not really. Did he have anything to say about Gnosis? Not that I'm aware of. I mean, maybe he knew about the Gnostics and about, this idea of this demiurge, right? Where God is actually like an evil god or something. He might have been aware of that, and maybe that informed some of what he wrote in the Meditations, but I don't know. I'm not like a historian of philosophy, so I don't really know. Um, yeah, I mean, maybe. We do know that Descartes' books were banned by the Catholic Church, though. Like he even writes a letter to the theology faculty at the Sorbonne and says, like, "Hey, I say a lot of stuff in here, like God might not exist or God might be a deceiver, and I don't actually believe that. I believe in God. I don't believe God is deceptive. Please don't ban my books." Of course, the book still got banned. This is why he spent a lot of time in the Netherlands. There was greater freedom, greater intellectual freedom there than in France. Did he invent the Force? No, I don't think so. Ugh, I don't think so. Um, Candidates for Force inventors, well, Newton and Descartes was one of the giants upon whose shoulders he stood. Yeah. Well, right, like, I mean, I get into this in another class. I used to teach a class called Philosophy of the Paranormal, and we have a unit on ESP and PK, so extrasensory perception, psychokinesis, where people claim that people can use their mental powers to detect other people's thoughts or to move objects with their minds. And I have always said to my students in that class that that is just an even bigger version of the mind body problem. Like, If the mental is immaterial, you not only do you have not only is it unclear how it could exert an extra sensory motor sort of force in the world, such that there could be ESP and PK, it's not even clear how our own bodies would work because there are problems with substance dualism. So, um, yeah, and as I started to say a moment ago, like a lot of thinkers tried to remove the problem that Descartes introduces. You know, Descartes, because we've got this mind body problem, mainly because Descartes says, well, the mind and the body are two different kinds of things. So then you've got Spinoza, who's a monist, Leibniz, who's a monist, and they all try and do away with the mind body problem with substance monism. Nowadays, physicalists do the same thing. Physicalism is a type of substance monism. So, anyway, now we're going to talk about the pairing problem. How do we establish pairing relations? All of this has to do with mind-body interaction. Just keep that in mind as we make our way through this. How do we establish pairing relations? The example Kim uses is the firing of two guns. One gun kills someone, the other gun does not. How do we establish the pairing relations? Which gun killed the person and which gun didn't? We could do it with a causal chain, right? Gun A, the trigger is pulled, the bullet leaves the chamber, and it strikes a person, whereas gun B is pointed in a different direction when the trigger is pulled. We've got a different causal chain such that the bullet doesn't hit the person. Um, but Kim thinks we can't really do it with the notion of causal chains because what we really need to appeal to are spatial relations. Um, Spatial relations, Kim says, are less problematic, and he formulates a metaphysical principle M. Uh, it is metaphysically possible for there to be two distinct physical objects, A and B, with the same intrinsic properties and hence the same causal potential or powers. One of these, say A, causes a third object, C, to change in a certain way, but B has no causal influence on it. Um, and we can use spatial relations to show why A affects C and B does not affect C. So he continues, the fact that A but not B causes C to change must be grounded in some fact about A, B, and C. Uh, since A and B have the same intrinsic processes, it must be their relational properties with respect to C that provide the desired explanation for their different causal roles. So why are we talking about all of this? Well, um, for Descartes, there's not really much to differentiate one soul from another. How would we how do I know that it's my soul that's causing my body to move and not some other soul? How do I know that my sensory systems and changes in my brain are affecting my soul and not some other soul? The only way we can make sense of causality here, you know, if we've got two objects with um, the exact same characteristics, like souls, the only way we can differentiate which one's causing what is with spatial relations. But um, souls are not located in space. So how do we pair the right souls to the right bodies? We can't really. So consider M star. It is metaphysically possible for there to be two souls, A and B, with the same intrinsic properties, such that they both act in a certain way at the same time, and as a result, a material object C undergoes a change. Moreover, it is the action of A, not that of B, that is the cause of the physical change in C. This is something that interactionist substance dualism can't really deal with. Again, because we have no pairing relation between soul A and C, or B and C for that matter, because souls are non spatial. They're non-material. They're not made of anything. They're not located in space or time. Uh, so um, so the interaction of substance dualist has no way of explaining how the soul controls or is affected by the body, nor what makes it one particular soul versus another one that's controlling or being affected by the body, because souls are non-physical. So if an interactionist substance dualist is going to reject M, they need to be able to explain why. If they're going to accept M, they have to explain how immaterial causes can have material effects. And as we saw with Princess Elizabeth, all Descartes had was this primitive notion. And Elizabeth didn't find that very satisfactory. Neither do many contemporary philosophers of mind. Well, fields are still physical. I don't. So let me say this, Grant. I don't think that Kim's discussion is exhaustive. Like when it comes to understanding causal relations, I don't think it's exhaustive. But maybe there's a way to make fields and spatial relations work. Think of something like the inverse square law, right? The closer I am to the planet Earth, the more the force of gravity affects me. But the farther away I get, the less its gravity affects me. It still affects me, but it's inversely proportional to the cube of the distance or something, right? I'm rusty on my sciency stuff here, but you get the idea. So, if I enter into a certain spatial relationship with a mass, I'll be affected by it because of the gravitational field, right? So what if consciousness, thought, is a field that is most connected to brain? That is actually something some people have proposed, interestingly. Um, but they don't. They kind of do the same thing Descartes does. They don't really explain how it works. They say like we might have a mental field or a consciousness field. Okay, how's that work? I don't know. They don't really explain it. Um, but it is something that's been proposed. Yeah. Okay. So there's no so so far. Okay, the reason why this doesn't seem to work is because souls are immaterial. So they don't exist in space. They're not made of anything. So there's seemingly no way for them to affect bodies or be affected by bodies. Do it. If you did, that you'd win the Nobel Prize. If this is the way minds work and you figured it out, there would be a Nobel Prize for you. Um, so what if we take the soul and we say, well, let's just put it in space? Physical space, not like out, like I was just talking about before, if I'm orbiting the Earth, not like that, but in a physical space, the same physical space that our bodies are. Well, now we're faced with a problem of where the mind is located. I mean, Plato thought that the soul was like the pilot of a ship. Descartes thought that the mind and body formed a union, as if the soul or the mind is somewhere in the body. The example Kim uses is like, oh, I get on an airplane and my body starts accelerating as the plane goes down the runway. Is my soul also accelerating? Um, like my soul's being carried along in here somewhere and it's accelerating at the same rate that the plane and I are accelerating. That's kind of weird. Um, is the soul like a ghost in the machine? Like Gilbert Ryle punned, Gilbert Ryle called Cartesian dualism the dogma of the ghost in the machine. And he meant that uh, like he was trying to show that it doesn't make sense. You know, like this ghost in the machine. What, like, is my body a machine and my mind a ghost that lives in it? Like, is my mind like so for the anime fans in the room, my is my body like the giant robot and my mind or my soul like the pilot of the robot? I mean, it might seem kind of intuitive, but there are problems with that. Uh, the giant robot analogy, as I like to call it, raises the homunculus fallacy. So if I've got a little person in here, what's controlling that little person? Another little person? Is it homunculi or little persons or little humans all the way down? That's an infinite regress. That's a problem. Now, going back to Descartes, Descartes thought that this interaction occurred in the pineal gland. Could you locate the pineal gland at a mind, in the pineal gland, in the brain? So that's a few possibilities. The soul could be in the body somewhere. The mind could be in the body somewhere. Maybe it's a particular part of the brain. Maybe it's the entire brain. Maybe it's in some part of your body. Wherever we locate the soul, Kim says that that wherever we put it in space, the soul would have to be like a geometric point because, as Descartes said, if we're following what Descartes' actually saying, minds aren't extended. So it would have to be like a singular geometric point. And then we're faced, even if we say, okay, maybe the mind is located in the body somewhere and it's just a geometric point because it's not extended. Now we're faced with the problems that Princess Elizabeth raised. How does an immaterial mind affect the body? How is it affected by the body? I mean, I know this is heavy duty metaphysics here, but you can see why Descartes treats the mind body causation as a primitive notion or a brute fact, because this is hard to figure out. But it's a problem that maybe we can escape by abandoning substance dualism. I mean, that's what other thinkers did. Like Spinoza said, okay, so we've got this interaction problem because we've got thinking substance and extended substance. Well, maybe there's only one substance. And for Spinoza, that substance was God. For Spinoza, Spinoza's like a pantheist. So God is the natural world. The whole cosmos is God. God or nature. That's how you can understand the views of Spinoza. And God has infinite attributes, two of which are thought and extension. And each of us is a finite mode of God. And we have extension, our bodies, and we have thoughts. So there's no interaction problem because it's all one substance, right? Physicalist philosophers go another way. They'll take one of two ways, as we'll see in a moment. They either say, well, everything ultimately boils down to the physical, but you have physical properties and then you have mental properties. So one substance, two kinds of properties. Or maybe if we go the reductive route, the mental stuff is just identical with the physical stuff. Problem solved. Interaction problem solved. Anyway, there aren't a lot of dualists today. Substance dualism, at least the interaction of substance dualism of Descartes, seems to raise more problems than it solves. And a lot of the contemporary dualists invoke God to solve them. And I'm not here to tell you what to believe, but I don't think that that's a satisfactory answer. I think it's kind of like a God of the gaps argument. How do minds and bodies interact if they're different substances? God made it that way. Okay, sure, buddy. I mean, if you want to be a substance dualist, fine. But that means the burden is on you to explain mind body interaction. And as we've seen, that is pretty difficult to do. Kim says this. He says, if you have set aside substance dualism, at least for now, You can take having a mind as simply as having a certain special set of properties, capacities, and characteristics. Something that humans and some higher animals possess, but sticks and stones do not. To say that something has a mind is to classify it as a certain sort of thing, as a thing with capacities for certain characteristic sorts of behavior and functions, such as sensation, perception, memory, learning, consciousness, and goal directed action. For this reason, it is less misleading to speak of having mentality than having a mind. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, substance dualism ain't the only game in town. You could be a reductive physicalist, also known as a type physicalist. We'll learn more about this when we talk about identity theory. But the idea is that um, mental states are really just identical with physical states. So when I have state of being in pain, that's really just reducible to a type of brain state. Or you can be a property dualist. Again, there are physical properties and there are mental properties. There's only one substance, there's only physical substance, matter, energy, fields, etc. But there's two types of properties, physical and mental. Kim describes it this way. He says, dualism is no longer a dualism of two sorts of substances. It is now a dualism of two sorts of properties, mental and physical. Property is used here in the broad sense. Mental properties comprise mental functions, capacities, events, states, and the like, and similarly for physical properties. So, reductive physicalism would just say that these mental properties are reducible to physical properties in the same way that biological properties are reducible to chemical properties, which are reducible to physical properties. Maybe mental properties would be reducible to biological, chemical, and ultimately to physical properties. So if you're a reductive physicalism, that's one way you might make sense of this. Property dualism says that the mental properties are not reducible to physical properties. Maybe they emerge out of simpler interactions um, in physical systems. So they're irreducible. They're ultimately a result of physical stuff, but they're not reducible to physical properties. They're a special set of properties. But whether you're a reductive or a non-reductive physicalist, you don't think that the mind is really an immaterial substance, a thinking substance. Oh wow, we made it, and with time to spare. Wow, that was a lot, huh? I like Kim's textbook, but it is dense and makes my brain hurt. What should we talk about next time? Well, next time we're going to cover behaviorism. Remember, next week there's only one class um, because of the long weekend. So we'll be looking at Kim chapter 3. And I've made the logical analysis of behavior by Hempel available as well. So that's the supplementary reading. So please make sure you've at least read Kim and take a look at Hempel if you want. And we'll be meeting on Wednesday because, again, long weekend, no class on Monday. I will also make that short instructional video probably sometime tomorrow so that you all feel confident heading into those reading responses. I'll make one video, but those instructions will work for both of those assignments. And I'll post an announcement on Brightspace once that's all finished. Ah, yes, Timothy, question.
Yeah, I have a question on the essay proposal. I
Mm-hmm.
just do, sorry, reflection assignment one. My bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, well, I'm in the process of choosing a topic, I guess, and obviously it'd be something we went through in class.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if it could be something like, is it machine functionalism? Is that somewhere here? Like,
Yeah, you could do that, but
machine.
I would suggest waiting until we've covered it.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean,
Yeah.
like, I'm just sort of brainstorming potential ideas right now.
Yeah, yeah,
And
totally.
and I was thinking like if I want to write on that topic, can I like connect it to topics outside of class, like maybe completely outside of class? Like let's say I watched a Star Trek episode.
Yes. Yes, you
I
can.
can.
Yes, you
Okay.
can. Here's the rule of thumb, and I'll
Right.
explain this in my video and in the instructional lecture for the essays, but here's my
Hmm.
rule of thumb. If you want to talk about something from outside of the course, make sure firstly it's related to the themes of the course, which it
Right.
sounds like it is, because
Yes.
Star Trek is
Yeah.
a lot of philosophy in Star Trek.
Yes.
Uh, and secondly, make sure that whatever,
Mhm.
outside thing you're talking about, you discuss it in as much detail, or you discuss the relevant course material or the
The
relevant
focus on the
philosophy
moral, yeah, focus on that.
as
Yes.
as much or more than the thing from outside. So don't spend
Right.
500 words telling me about
Tell
Star
me more
Trek
about, yeah.
and then 50 words on the
Right.
mind.
Right.
Do
Try
an
to,
even
yeah.
split, right?
Right.
But yeah,
And
that's absolutely fine.
so like to try and get this philosophical connection, there's I can't I honestly can't remember if we like went through this philosopher in detail, but I think he's Searle.
Yeah, not yet. We haven't really yet.
John Searle, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know
not
he's like on the
yeah.
lecture syllabus, but we didn't
Well,
go through it yet. So,
when we talk about functionalism, we'll talk briefly about him.
mhm.
I can't remember if I made it one of the optional but recommended readings, but yeah, absolutely. Searle is huge in philosophy of mind. So
Right.
yeah, he's fair game for sure.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure I'm
Yeah.
staying in the range before starting,
Yeah,
before
no,
going
that's
too
good.
crazy.
It's
Yeah.
good that you're thinking of that, but it sounds like you're thinking about exactly the kind of thing I want you to be thinking about for these things.
Okay,
So,
perfect.
thumbs
Perfect.
up.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions before we go? Because I am getting hungry, and I don't know about you guys, but I think I need to go have a snack. And it looks like people are already leaving. So, if there are no other questions, I think we can leave it there for today. Question in the chat here. Yes. Yeah, yeah. Someone wants to speak to me privately after class. We can do that. Yes, we can. So I guess that's it for today, everyone. So I hope you all have a nice long weekend. Stay tuned for those instructions. I'll make those available. And yeah, enjoy your time, and I'll see you on next Wednesday when we'll talk about behaviorism. Bye,
Have a
everyone.
nice break.
Thanks. You too.
See you.
Bye bye.